Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Shiva Patel, and welcome to the Spurs post-game reaction show with Shivam. Of course, as you know, I'm a basketball analyst live here in San Antonio, Texas. And it's been a while. The Spurs were off on a little break, due to having some COVID issues, but I'm here back reacting to this game. And remember, you can watch every Spurs React episode on the Patel Pick and Roll Sports YouTube channel, and be sure to subscribe. And you can also watch on my Shivam Patel Facebook channel and the Patel Pick and Roll Sports Facebook channel. And going forward, I won't be available doing this every game, but the games that I do, I am going to do this react. I'll make sure I let you guys know, and I'm going to be back Monday night against the Brooklyn Nets. It's going to be a pretty big matchup, so I'm looking forward to reacting to that game. But back to this game, the Spurs had a tough loss tonight against the Oklahoma City Thunder, 102-99. The Oklahoma City Thunder, Luens Dort ended up making a buzzer beater, to a three-pointer buzzer beater to give the Thunder the win. Like I said, 102-99. It was just a tough, game for the Spurs, who were coming off, a week and a half layoff, due to the COVID, issues that they were having. They started the rodeo road trip. Played a couple games, were looking really good, but then 4 players tested positive, for the coronavirus, and then a bunch of other players were out, due to contract tracing. Devin Vassell was out, Rudy Gay was out, Keldon Johnson, and of course DeMar DeRozan was out due to personal reasons. Unfortunately, his dad, passed away, so he was out and not available for the team. But LaMarcus Aldridge was back, due to injury, but the Spurs just fell, a little bit short. They missed 4 games which were postponed, due to the COVID issues. In the middle of this rodeo road trip, they ended up having just a 1-game trip against the Thunder. And at least the good news is the Spurs finished the rodeo road trip at 2-1, a winning record. But of course, those other games that were missed, the Pacers, the Pistons, the Knicks, and the Cavs will be made up, the second half of the season, which just came out this afternoon. You can find that on Spurs.com. So the Spurs will have a really tough, second half of the schedule, playing a lot of games, a lot of different days to make up for that. But unfortunately, the Spurs, they had to do a quarantine, in Charlotte after they found out about the positive cases. They did not get much practice time at all leading up to this game against the Thunder, and they just had 9 players. They even called up 2 players, from the G League, Trey Jones and Luka Samanic, who were basically tearing it up in the G League. So those guys were ready, to come and contribute in the on the NBA level. The Spurs started out really well. But I think the turning point was, in the first quarter, DeJounte Murray, had 2 fouls, which took him out of the game. And, they were kind of ticky-tack fouls, but, they were a foul in today's NBA. So DeJounte Murray had to sit. And, the Spurs had a nice little rhythm going, and he was the best player on the floor today for the Spurs, scoring 27 points, getting a bunch of steals, just being very active, guarding Thunder's best player, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's an up-and-coming star, in the NBA, only 22 years old. So then once, DeJounte Murray went out with those 2 fouls, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's eyes just basically lit up, and every opportunity he got, he was just exploiting, the matchups that he had, the favorable matchups, whether it's switching against the big. He really cooked Lonnie Walker. He cooked Trey Jones. Really, the Spurs just had no answer for him. And DeJounte Murray is a very unique defender, because not only because of his size, but of his wingspan. He has a really long wingspan. He's very active. He plays hard. He denies the ball. So all that was missing, and Shai was able to get a lot of points. He actually had a career high today, 42 points, and it was just a little bit, too much, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for the Spurs. But they ended up, bouncing back in the second quarter, having a halftime lead. The third quarter they played strong, but then in the middle of the third, their defensive intensity kind of fell off, and I think that has to do with the Spurs being a little bit tired. Because like I said, they were in that long break, not having the chance to be able to work out and practice. So I think their legs got a little heavy. They got a little tired. The Thunder got a lot of wide open 3-point shots, and they're NBA players. Even the Thunder is one of the worst teams in the NBA. And if you give NBA players wide open shots, they're going to knock it down. And, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander was still cooking, whether it's from three, going to the basket, finishing in the mid-range. But I noticed in the fourth quarter, when the pressure was on and the Spurs were having a nice run, playing well. And the Spurs, with DeJounte Murray coming back and they throwing multiple bodies at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he did a great job of trusting his teammates. He would come off the pick and roll. He would get doubled. And he would either find Al Horford, in the corner, or Luens Dort, who ended up making the game-winning three, or Darius Bazley. And I think those guys were making shots. So he really did a great job of trusting his teammates, and making it tough on the Spurs defense. But as a Spurs fan, you have to take it. This guy has 42 points on you. You have to force the others to beat you. And I think they did in the fourth quarter, but they made shots. And you had to go, shake their hand. It was just, the NBA is a make or miss league, and the Thunder just made more shots in the fourth quarter than the Spurs. And the Spurs didn't really have DeJounte played well, but I think he expended a lot of energy on the defensive end of the floor, so his offense was a little bit impacted in the fourth quarter. And LaMarcus struggled, with his usual mid-range turnaround jumper was not falling with the consistency that it's been falling in past games. He was not as aggressive in the fourth quarter. I would like to have to see him, go against Al Horford, attack that matchup, get to the free throw line, because he has the quickness and the size over Al Horford, but he didn't take advantage of that. While Al Horford was taking advantage of that on LaMarcus Aldridge on the other end of the floor. Lonnie Walker struggled. He's been out the last couple of games, even before the games were paused for the Spurs. He just couldn't get into a rhythm either. He was missing a lot of shots. I thought Lonnie could have attacked the basket more. I think he settled a little bit too much from three and mid range. But that's going to happen when you get tired. You don't have the legs to be able to attack the basket. And he did attack the basket late in the fourth quarter to get to tie the game at 97. But I think it was a little bit too late. I think he needed to do that from the get go, and someone needed to pick up DeJounte Murray, because he was already doing it on the defensive end of the floor, and he didn't have enough energy to continue to play both sides and continue to score the points needed, for the Spurs to be successful. And like I said, the Spurs forced the Thunder to beat them. But the rotations tonight were a little bit, weaker. They were allowing, like I said, wide open three-pointers. I think the rotations were not as sharp. The on-ball defense, everybody besides DeJounte Murray was not sharp at all. They were allowing too many straight lines to the basket. The Thunder were able to get a lot of easy layups, offensive rebounds. The Thunder won the rebounding battle 52-44 today. Jakob Poeltl, was struggling, on the boards, as well as LaMarcus Aldridge and Drew Eubanks the time that he got on the floor. So I think that's something that the Spurs needed to clean up. And the Thunder had 18 three-pointers. Most likely, when you get over 15 three-pointers in an NBA game, you're going to win the game. And I think the Thunder just made more threes, than the Spurs did. The Spurs did make 8 threes, which is not bad. But when your opponent is making 18 threes and shooting over 50% from the arc, you're going to lose the game. And I think it was just tough, on the Spurs tonight, with all those contributing factors to why the Thunder were able to pull out the victory, against the Spurs. And let me talk about some of the young guys. Trey Jones and Luka Samanic were able to get some action, coming off the G League. I think Trey Jones played really well today. I know he only scored 4 points, but he's a point guard. He wasn't looking for his shot. His goal was to get his objective was to get everybody set up in the right positions, feed everybody in the right positions. He had some nice passes, had some nice assists. He was under control. He didn't get sped up. I liked his on the ball defense. That's something that was a staple of his at Duke. He was aggressive at times. When he got a nice inbound pass and went and made a nice reverse layup. Went underneath the basket to protect his shot and made some nice shot of reverse layup and made a nice floater, which has been his bread and butter in the G League. So I think Trey Jones played really well, and he has high potential. I think he can have a great career with the Spurs. He just needs a little bit more developing. He's still a young player. He's only 21 years old. He played 2 years in college, but he's still young and still needs more time to develop. So Luka Samanic on the other end, the first Spurs first round pick 2 years ago. I think he didn't get as many minutes as I thought he would. Despite him being in the starting lineup, he did make a couple of jump shots. I liked it. Another inbound pass. When he just attacked the basket, used his size and athleticism. Also in the break, he sprinted down the floor. I believe it was either Lonnie or DeJounte found him, and he had a one-on-one matchup, and he had a nice spin move under control with a nice finish. With the right hand. So I think he has potential. Again, he's still developing into his body. He needs to continue to gain strength, but he has the size and the tools to be able to become an effective NBA player. I'd like to see him shoot with a little bit more consistency as he was shooting in the G League. But he took what the defense gave him. The Spurs didn't ask him to do a big role. I think it was just a step for him to be able to come in and contribute. And he did have a couple of rebounds, and he also had 4 points, just like Trey Jones. So those were some of the young guys that came in and played. Keita Bates Diop also was a guy that's not gotten a lot of minutes for the Spurs. I think he had some nice flashes. And he played really good defense. He was using his athleticism and wingspan to be able to effectively guard the opponent. He also had some nice driving layups. So I think he has more potential on the defensive end of the floor, but the Spurs just needed bodies. They only had 9 players available for this game, so they had to play as many young guys as possible. And the reason that they struggled, the Spurs start the game, was because their lineups that they've been playing have not played too much together. With Lucas Dominguez being in the starting lineup, Trey Jones coming off the bench, Keita Bates Diop, Trey Lyles even got some action, Drew Eubanks. So this lineup is not used to playing with one another. So I think they have to get adjusted to one another. I like the ball movement in the first half. I thought the ball movement in the second half could have been a little bit better. I think the Spurs were rushing too many shots. Because this Thunder defense could be had. They're not a very good defensive team, and that's a reason why they're one of the worst teams in the NBA. So I think they kind of fed into that by bailing the Thunder out with a lot of tough shots. And I think they could have gotten some better offensive production, especially in the third and fourth quarter, because I think their offense really went down, and I think that contributed, to the Spurs not playing as good defense, because as a young team, your defense is usually dictated by your offense. If you're making a lot of shots, you'll play hard defense. If you're not making a lot of shots, then you'll be lazy on the defensive end. And I think that's what happened with the Spurs. But it was a good start, after missing about a week and a half of action, due to their COVID issues. I think they came in, they got their legs underneath them. I think they're just getting used to playing basketball again with not a lot of practice time. They had a chance to, steal the win, against the Thunder, but unfortunately, they came up a little short. And again, everybody, thank you so much for watching. And remember, you can watch every single Spurs post-game reaction episode with me, Shivam Patel, basketball analyst, on the Patel Pick and Roll Sports YouTube channel. And be sure to subscribe. And you can also watch it on the Shivam Patel Facebook channel and the Patel Pick and Roll Sports Facebook channel. And again, please put your thoughts or your comments, in the chat section below. I would love to read, your reaction. It's a tough loss for the Spurs. So Spurs Nation, please put your chats in the chat section below, and they will appear, live on the show. But, just to wrap it up, they were joking on the telecast that it was the shortest road trip in history because there was only one game in. But now, they have a chance to rebound, coming back home. Only a couple more games left before, the first half of the season is going to be over, and the All-Star game is going to happen. And, of course, it was tough with DeMar DeRozan not making the All-Star team, but I think he's dealing with personal matters right now. But I would love to see him get rewarded, because as Pop talked about his leadership, he's made a lot of clutch plays, put the Spurs on his back a lot. He's been averaging over 25 points a game. I think he's been completely balling and making more threes, of course, with the mid-range. So his stats are there. He's getting more assists. The Spurs are doing really well. The 8th best record in the NBA, the 6th best record in the Western Conference, which of course that might go a little bit down now that they lost. But I think DeMar DeRozan has put together a spectacular season so far, and doing it with a bunch of young guys. And he's been a great leader and a great mentor for the young guys. And Coach Pop and the Spurs have completely trusted him by putting by handing the keys to him, on the offensive end of the floor, because everything goes through DeMar DeRozan. He's the focal point of the Spurs offense. So I would love to see him get, gotten rewarded with an All-Star berth, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So hopefully that motivates him to continue to play down the stretch. And we're all thinking about him, about the passing of his dad. So just before I wrap up on the show, again, put your comments in the chat section below. I will read them live on the show. And remember, you can subscribe to the Patel Pick and Roll Sports YouTube channel, where you can watch every episode of the Spurs post-game reaction. So just real quick, before we'll get out of here, just going to preview the next game for the Spurs, which is Saturday night against the New Orleans Pelicans, who won tonight against the Detroit Pistons. But the Pelicans have been really struggling. They did have a big win, on Sunday against the Boston Celtics, who also been struggling. But they came back from like 25 points down and roared back. And I think that got their confidence going, because before they were like on a 7 or 8 game losing streak. So now they're on a 2-game winning streak. So they're going to be a dangerous team coming in. Despite the Pelicans struggling, it's always been a tough matchup for the Spurs. The Pelicans have these young, athletic players. They're one of the youngest teams in the NBA, have a bunch of players under 25 years old. Of course, Brandon Ingram is a solid player. Zion Williamson's an upcoming, star. So I Lonzo Ball, JJ Redick. So I think the Pelicans have a really solid team. Eric Bledsoe all around. I think it's just really they've been struggling on the defensive end on the floor, and they've been just allowing teams to just score a bunch of points. And I think, offense is not the problem for them, but it's a problem stopping the opponent. So hopefully the Spurs can get, the 4 guys, Vassell, Rudy Gay, DeMar DeRozan, and Keldon Johnson back for the game against the Pelicans. And the Spurs will be able to get whatever they want on the offensive end of the floor. It's just about stopping them on the defensive end. I would like to see, better consistency on the defensive end of the floor, more commitment. The Spurs just need to make shots, continue to get their legs underneath them. Luckily now, they'll have 2 days off, Thursday and Friday, before they play against Saturday against the Pelicans. So hopefully they'll be able to get some practice time in these next couple of games, get their legs back underneath them, get in the gym and continue to work as a team and work individually to help them build off this performance and, continue to play well against the Pelicans, because this is a very crucial stretch before the All-Star break, which is going to happen next Saturday. Or next Sunday is the All-Star game, but the next weekend is going to be the start of the All-Star break. The Spurs need to rack up as many wins as possible, because they have like I said earlier, they got a brutal stretch, coming up after the All-Star break in the second half of the season. They play against a lot of Eastern Conference teams, which the Eastern Conference this year has been really strong with Philly, Brooklyn, Boston, Toronto, Milwaukee. So that's going to be a tough stretch. And they have got a lot of back-to-backs because they had to make up all the games that they lost, in this first half of the season. So Spurs need to continue to win. They have a very winnable game against the Pelicans before a huge showdown matchup against the Brooklyn Nets, which that's going to be the toughest game for the Spurs before the All-Star break, and then before they play against the Knicks again, and then they can get revenge on the Thunder, and then it's going to be the All-Star break. So I think the real toughest game is going to be against the Nets, and that can go either way. Spurs usually rise up to the occasion and play well against the best teams. We saw it because they beat the Nuggets, they beat the Celtics when they were good at the beginning of the season. They beat the 2 LA teams, the Clippers and the Lakers. So the Spurs will continue to rise up and continue to play well against the best teams. It's just that these teams under 500 that they need to take care of business. So they need to beat the Pelicans, they need to beat the Knicks, and they need to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Nets game can go back either way. The Spurs need to right the ship at home. They've been really struggling. They're 7-8 at the AT&T Center, 9-4 away, so they're much more comfortable on the road. So hopefully they can right the ship at the AT&T Center and rack up some wins before they can get a little break for All-Star. So thank you again, everybody, so much for joining. Again, you can watch all the Spurs post-game reaction show with me, Shivam Patel, on the Patel Pick and Roll Sports YouTube channel, and be sure to subscribe. You can also watch it on my personal Shivam Patel Facebook channel. Be sure to follow, and the Patel Pick and Roll Sports Facebook channel. You can also follow that. So again, I'll be back. I won't be back Saturday, but I'll be back Monday night reacting to the huge game against the Brooklyn Nets, one of the best teams in the NBA with the 3 stars, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving. Hopefully Kevin Durant will be back by then. But I'll be back on Monday around 10 o'clock. Again, that's a 7:30 tip. Again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you again, everybody, for the audience comments. And have a good night. And go Spurs, go.